You're very welcome to another episode of the Scaling Your Business podcast. For this episode, we are joined by Philip Martin, the founder of Blanco Nino. Philip, you're very welcome to the show.
Glad to be here, Ryan. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, delighted to have you. You've been spoken highly of. You're one of the guests that I mentioned to people that I'm having on, and they've all spoken highly of you. So typical fashion of the shows, we start with your early days and then we move on from there. So if my research is correct, I know you're based in Tipperary at the moment, but did you grow up in Dublin?
Yeah. North County Dublin, a place called Kilsalahan, which nearly no one ever has heard of.
Never heard of it.
Yeah. But it's between, say, the Knoll and St. Margaret's there. It's a very good place. Or maybe you could say Swords and Ashburn, if you want to kind of.
I was going to say, mentioning the Knoll as a place for people to recognize is not a big place either.
Probably not. Yeah. There's no beaming lights coming from the hills of the Knoll. No. But no, it's very, very much a kind of a farming area. We had a farm, but we still have the farm there. I grew up there, but my mum is from Tipperary and Cashel, so there was always a bit of a connection there. But now certainly the tortilla factory called Clonmel home. So not necessarily the world-renowned home for authentic Mexican cuisine, Clonmel historically, but we're doing our best to put it on the map.
You're doing a damn good job at it, and that's what I want to get into today. Funnily enough, as you're mentioning where you're from, I'm from Retoten, County Meath, so I'm not too far from Ashburn, and I think I can picture the area. There's a small yellow church on the back roads between Ashburn and Swords, so I imagine it's somewhere around there.
Yeah. You know the Kilkee Lodge there.
Yes.
The Lodge National. Yeah. It's not too far down that road there.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah. I know it's lovely. It's lovely now. We're very, very lucky to grow up in that kind of that area now, to be honest. So
very cool. Well, before we move on from growing up out there, people can usually point to, when I say people, I'm referencing previous guests, can usually point to like a small number of people that had a positive impact on them in their early years that helped them become the person they are today. So like influential characters or people who have had a massive impact. Things like acquaintances, close friends, parents, teachers. Anyone spring to mind for you when I mentioned that?
Yeah. Well, I guess there's a few of the usual suspects in the sense of, your father has a pretty big impact on you when you're growing up. My father actually passed away when I was 8, but he was very much a larger than life character, a publican. So the family business would have been Mayo's there in Castleknock. So there was very much. I would have spent a lot of time, even when I was quite young, in the kind of the kitchen and in the pub. So there's certain probably characters, traits that environment brings to you. I think as a kid, probably makes you a little bit more maybe open and maybe comfortable around a lot more people or whatever have you. But that's probably one of the bigger ones, and it is probably the usual one. And the other person who generally springs to mind was a teacher I had when I went to school in Malahide, and his name was actually Mr. Linsky. I don't actually know what his first name was, and I'd love to track him down at some point, but because I'm highly dyslexic, and he would have basically changed the way I kind of look at learning and so on. And rather than learning being this terrible, drudging task that I would want to avoid like the plague, he made me actually enjoy, just absorbing information, and found a way, basically to find my own way of. I learned kind of how to learn, you could say, with himself. So I think in terms of turning the rudder on a boat at an early age, that probably would have been very, very instrumental. It's amazing what a few teachers can do at a very young age.
For sure.
And certainly I'd be immensely grateful to him and the teachers there when I was quite young, because you do when you're dyslexic, or you have a different way of absorbing information. When you're at a younger age, you generally think there's something wrong with you, you're just not able to. You have a different way of looking at the world, you know.
Mm. Well, yeah, I asked that question of all my guests, your episode 130, and I'd say about 40% of them can name a teacher that had a massive impact on them, and that they'll voluntarily name. So like most of the time they pick people with their parents, but I'd say over 50 people have mentioned the name of a teacher without me even saying what teacher. They just pick a teacher. I'd like to rewind the clocks before we get into all good things Blanco Nino to the year 2011 when you opened up Little Ass Burrito Bar. You spent over 7 years there, which is remarkable. Almost 8 years. Kudos to you. A business like that cannot be easy. So my one question on this is, what lessons did you take from your time at Little Ass Burrito? Did you improve any skills? Did you go into it with one thought of what it would be like, and in the middle of it, you're like, this is completely different than what I thought of? Did you improve your building rapport skills, finance, customer service? Just give me a broad overview of like what you took from that almost 8 years.
I think you know that those questions are really hard because I think it's all of the above. You know, really, Ryan. Like when you're opening any business, there's such vast quantities that need to be learned. Like I think there's a saying I heard a few years back that an entrepreneur is someone who bites off more than they can chew in the hope they can learn how to chew before they choke to death. You know, and there was certainly a large amount bitten off in my case, and you do like my general outlook and approach to things is that I'll figure it out. I'll always figure it out. You know, no matter how tough it is, there's always a way of finding the solution, and everything is in a constant state of improvement. So what it is today will not likely be what it is tomorrow, and there's always a way to get better at things. So, you know, I started off the burrito bar, and it's like it transformed, you know, every year, in terms of the simple things down to, you know, the order of ingredients being put into the burritos, the way, you know, your whether it be contracts of employment or how you deal with people, how you manage staff, how you structure a business, you know, your understanding of finance and raising of finance. Like it's a very, very long list. And I don't, there's nearly, with any business, I think it's rare that there's any portion of life or knowledge that is not in a constant state of flux or improvement, you know.
There's a great couple of one-liners in there already for the podcast. Today you're the CEO and founder of Blanco Nino. So rather than me give kind of the pitch of what it is, why don't you take the mic and tell the listeners and watchers exactly what it is?
Well, Blanco Nino is an authentic corn tortilla, a tortilla chip producer based in Clonmel, Tipperary. We in short make all natural, traditionally made, naturally gluten-free corn tortillas, tortilla chips, and we sell them across 16 European markets, and with actually the corn tortillas into restaurants, bars, and hotels. Now the tortilla chips, which are more recently launched, we sell in Ireland, the UK, Sweden so far. But we're quickly, like that's been quite explosive in terms of growth, which is very, very exciting. But we're producing product in a way that is to a degree less common by the day. So we bring in corn from the Americas. We cook for about an hour, depending on the product. We then steep overnight in large vats, so the corn steeps in the water overnight, and then we volcanic stone grind that corn into a corn dough called masa. And then we take that ground corn dough and we shape and we bake it into corn tortillas. And some of those tortillas go to restaurants, you know, bars and hotels. And then some of them we basically keep and we allow to rest overnight before being cut and lightly fried into the tortilla chips. So like we've got a small number of ingredients, you might say inputs, like corn is really the main ingredient outside of things like salt and chili for the seasoning and certain things with the chips. But it's the variance in the process and the granularity of the corn and the how long it's baked, how the temperature of the water. So out of a relatively short ingredient list, there's quite a large number of products that are produced. But that process, that slow process of nixtamalization, which is what it's called, it's as old as 3,000 plus years. That it was originally, they reckon it was originally invented by the Olmec, belting around the Yucatan there, and they reckon that it was originally discovered. Now it's all hypothesis, but through a process of the lads sitting on the beach or wherever have you, and they basically had seashells that they'd cooked up or whatnot, and they had put corn, or the ancestor of corn, and I can't pronounce the ancestor of corn, I'd murder the name, but in a pot, and the process of cooking the corn with the seashells, basically the calcium leached from the seashells into the corn, and had this they call nixtamalization, which is basically calcium cooking, or alkaline cooking is another way of calling it. But that process of alkaline cooking transforms corn from being relatively indigestible to being more so in the sense of its bioavailability, to being incredibly bioavailable, and the staple of so many Mesoamerican civilizations. And without that process, it's arguable that you wouldn't have had this kind of flourish of incredible civilization in the Mesoamerican region. But they reckon that the Olmecs were the first boys to belt away at it, and they used basically seashells, which is where the calcium came from. And then supposedly the Maya, following them, used actually more commonly calcium-rich wood ash. And then the Aztecs were the boys who basically got calcium from the ground, which is the more recent kind of iteration, but say more recent, that's it's way over 1,000, 2,000 years old probably at this point. But the thing is, most producers have now drifted from this traditional process, and they're now basically just rehydrating corn flour, whereas we're doing it the old-fashioned way, and we take about it's over 3 days to make the product from start to finish, whereas the average tortilla chip will take about 25 minutes. And that amount of kind of time between the slow steeping of the corn and the slow overnight resting of the corn, that time is almost an ingredient in itself. To get the flavor in the corn, you need that slow steeping process. To get the kind of the crunch in the chip, it needs the overnight resting. You could fry there and then, but it wouldn't be the same, and it would have a much higher oil content as well. And so there's methods in the madness, with a lot of these traditional processes.
It's fascinating because I watched the segment you had on RTE of, I don't know if it was the same factory you're in now, but it brought you through the process, and I'll leave the link to the video below. It's like a 9-10 minute video if anyone's interested in watching it, and that led me to your website before I was doing research for this podcast to purchase a box of 6 tortillas. So I'm looking forward for them arriving so I can taste them. In terms of, you're obviously a food company, so in terms of when you think of let me rephrase it, is there something that you think potential food startups in Ireland or the UK should pay attention to when getting started? Something that if they don't pay attention to could be detrimental to their business or their bottom line revenue. I know that you got, like, obviously I think it's 8 core company values that you live by, and I'll leave a link to them below. But is there something that you think of that potential food startups should pay attention to?
Well, the thing is, we've done nearly everything the most difficult way possible. Like, if we're being honest, most food startups now, there tends to be what I might often call as a spectrum of food startups. You'll have incredibly good marketing and branding individuals who go and get a private label manufacturer to produce a product on their behalf, and they just market and sell the product. And then you'll often have times whereby you'll have these manufacturers who their core competence isn't marketing and branding, and they'll just produce, product for businesses who are very good at marketing and branding. And then you'll have the kind of rare kind of case whereby you'll have a brand that is significant enough and they're kind of producing and marketing their own stuff. But those big outfits tend to be, you have a lot of them that are like, say, a PepsiCo and these guys who are immensely impressive, but they, in my opinion, going to go very far down the hyper efficiency route. And sometime, and that's the middle market, and that's, there's a great appetite for that product. Whereas we're in a way a blend of what would be kind of an artisan, kind of micro family run style of approach to production, with the want and desire to, we spend a lot of time and effort in designing our packaging and putting our best foot forward. And then we have a lot of ambition in terms of distribution and making sure we're as efficient as possible and running the business in a very process oriented way. So we're quite a kind of a strange one in the sense of how we've approached it, and going back to kind of manufacturing in a very quite an old approach. But for people who are starting out, it's most people starting out now tend to be doing it private label manufacturing for someone else, and it wasn't for me. It wouldn't be for me.
I was going to say, do you reckon that is because they're looking to get into it to make a profit, whereas you went into it for the love of it?
Probably, yeah, probably. Like, look, I certainly, it's very important to me that we make money as well. Now, I just have to be mildly obsessive, personality, and I just want to do things a certain way, and I don't tend to be fairly uncompromising in that. So, but yeah, like if people want to make money and make money quick, it makes little sense to, try and reestablish, say, a traditional process completely on the other side of the planet from which it's derived. Like, Clonmel is not known for its, generational tortilla makers, like it's not like you can pick up volcanic stone carvers around the corner. So there's a lot of learnings and pain that goes into going through that process, and it's not easy. Doesn't happen quick. So it really depends on the motives. If you love a certain product or an industry and you're making like a 10-20 year commitment to it, you approach it in a very different way than if you want to build a band and sell it in 3 years. It's a completely different approach. And it really comes down to the business. But there's some fundamental stuff that everyone needs to get right, in terms of having the right people on board who share and believe in the same things that you believe in. There's nothing worse than going down the road with people who have a completely different vision of what sits at the end of it, and that can be just carcinogenic. So people is just immensely important, and it's nearly a cliche. I think every bloody business book says it and everyone says it, but it's a cliche because it's true. Sorry, Ryan. Go on.
I was just going to say it's evident because your business is continue to grow, and the success of it is brilliant. I'm reading a couple of things here. You've got a growing list of achievements: winner of Best New Idea at Ireland's Best Young Entrepreneur 2014, finalist in the AIB Startup Awards 2015, the Journal's 2016 Irish Companies to Watch, and then most recently, your chili and lime tortilla chips have reached the finals of the Blas na HÉireann Irish Food Awards this year. That's just a couple of the awards that I've picked out. I could continue to talk, but what would you say to anyone thinking of putting themselves forward for such awards? Is it great in terms of publicity, team morale? I guess my real question is, why do it?
Well, there's a commercial incentive to go, right, well, if we get our product recognized as being special, as being of a certain standard, it does make the lives of the sales guys easier, when it comes around to having a chat with their buyer or so on. So there's a reality there. And when it comes to like awards for recognition, I think, well, certainly in my case, I have a habit of just, plowing on day after day and not really recognizing kind of achievement or celebrating kind of milestones, that type of kind of thing. So historically, those kind of awards have been a means of us kind of recognizing, well, fuck, maybe we're doing something right here.
I'm right.
So like I think there's a very good place, and I recommend people should do it. Even the process of submitting these applications, and it's been a very long time since we've submitted kind of one of these applications, but they do also, there's an element of challenge in, they ask you a lot of pointed questions if it's a business one, as to what you're doing, or applying to an accelerator. And the process of even answering those questions will give value to the person completing the form.
For sure. My next question, actually, I'm gonna skip that question I have in front of me, and it's what's next for you? You started, I guess, over 5 years ago, and now you're selling to more than 350 stores. Some of them are the likes of Dunnes Stores and SuperValue. You've expanded to the UK and some of the Nordic countries. So if you look at like 3 to 5 years down the line, where's future growth coming from?
Well, there's an immense amount of opportunity there at the moment. It's a very rare day that we get a no off anyone we send product to. So in terms of growth, we see the Europe being, there's many years of growth left in Europe just within tortilla chips, just opening up in different markets and then expanding in different markets. But outside of tortilla chips, we're going to be looking at introducing salsas. Now, it's going to be a long journey by itself. We have an idea of how we can actually produce a really special product, and it sits outside kind of the conventional approach to making salsas at scale. So there's quite a bit of figuring out in terms of process design and that kind of thing to do that. But really, outside of new product development and that kind of thing, I'm now kind of in a place whereby I want to make sure that we're building a business that is enjoyable as possible to build on a daily basis, and that everyone is enjoying being part of the company and make the day as fun, as enjoyable as possible. Because focusing too much on an end objective can really kill people in the short term. And like there needs to be like there's goals and there's targets and all that sort of stuff, but making the day-to-day as enjoyable as possible, I think is crucial. So that's I also want to see that most of our investors are given like an exit opportunity at some point in the future. Not too far away on the horizon, but I would foresee myself being involved in the business next 10, 20 years at least, Nice. But I'd say the day I step back would be basically the day I recognize that I'm no longer the best person to run the business, as opposed to any want and desire to be, to leave it. So like I certainly am not probably I don't have all the competencies of running a much bigger company, and there will come a point whereby someone far more proficient at such will be there or should be there, and at that point I'll start kind of reducing my kind of day-to-day, I'd say.
That's impressive that you can, one, recognize that, but two, admit that. That's not common. There's a small group of people that have led companies to such a high growth stage that they recognize going, actually, my talents aren't in this. I'm going to step back. I can name a few who stepped into CMO or CRO roles and brought in a CEO because they knew they weren't the person to bring the company to that next stage. So kudos to you for recognizing that. A few more questions left for you, Phil. I'd like you to rewind to like a very young Phil, like 18, 19 years old, before you embarked on this journey. And can you think, and then fast forward to current day, Phil, and look in the gaps between, can you think of a skill that when you started out in your career, you weren't great at, but was important or maybe even critical to improve on if you wanted to thrive in the industry you're in? And if so, if you can think of one, what is that?
Um, it's tough. It's tough. Like it's you could said before, like it's nearly everything. It needs to needs to improve. But um, the one key thing is probably the management of people, and the finding of the people. I'd say, like I think if you can get good at finding good people that are aligned, um, the rest of it becomes a lot easier.
Mm.
So like I've made mistakes in the past, whether it be with the restaurant or otherwise, hiring people on skill alone and going right, they're able to do the job, and not ensuring kind of team fit and not having as holistic as a view of kind of how this person might work with that person, team dynamic, and now our recruitment process is very, very thorough, and there's quite a lot that goes into it that checks certain parts of the certain boxes. Whether it be competence is very important and capability and all that, but then team dynamic and ensuring that there's a right amount of complementary skill sets and how that team will look like with that person in it. So it's just, I'd say people, it's just getting better with knowing people, being able to probably see bullshit when it's been said, and just understanding people better is probably what it is. Maybe Ryan. That's what I can think.
It's a good answer. I've got two short questions left for you, and then we're finished. Have you got a personal definition of what success means to you?
So short answers. So the trick is, I think most of us often define what we think success is based on what everyone else perceives success to be, as opposed to kind of challenging ourselves to go, well, look, what actually are the things that I enjoy most doing? And I think more recently, success is just becoming about actually making sure the team is working together really well, enjoying as much the day-to-day of running the business, and ensuring that everyone's making good money, the business is going the right direction, and enjoying each day, as opposed to an idea of having a G5 and living somewhere. And my philosophy is very much is, if I can make the day-to-day work and hum really well, whatever, say, material possessions I would like, my belief is that will come in time. And if I just focus on making each day as good as possible, for the business, for the team, for customers, for suppliers, and so on.
Nice. Final question for you is, if you had the decision-making power to add a mandatory subject to the secondary school curriculum that's currently not on it, what would it be and why?
It would probably there's a lot of stuff I'd probably like to, but I'd say it has to be practical financial education, in terms of like actually how mortgages work, the effects of compound interest and saving and investing. I think there's a bit of it's a terrible situation, I feel, whereby so much of the population of the world feel disenfranchised and outside of the financial system. And I think a bit of education at a younger age, in terms of how things like stock markets work, or an increased participation in these kind of wealth generating systems, and even just how to exist in the world. Like, I think so much of our education is detached from day-to-day practice and how to actually live. So I think if there was something more in terms of practical financial education, how to raise or how to get a mortgage, these little things, But I haven't really talked too much about that, to be honest. Now, Ryan, I'd probably want to. Yeah,
it's a question I like to throw people at the end to get their honest thoughts on it. So you answered it well. Philip, it's been a pleasure spending the last 30 minutes with you. I'm looking forward to my box of 6 tortilla chips arriving. I'll let you know what I think of them. But for spending 30 minutes with me today, hope the listeners enjoyed it as much as I did, and wish you continued success.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, we only launched that part of the website not too long ago. So we're doing direct to consumer now, which is kind of a new horizon of the source.
Are you driving many sales from the website? Is that it, or is it just in stores?
Well, we're starting to look at e-commerce now as well, or from the website, and we really need to try and drive that on a bit more. That's but it's mainly all in stores at the moment. So the website's Blanco-Nino.com if anyone wants to check it out.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I'll leave links to that and the video I mentioned that you're on RTE and your LinkedIn and everything below. But yeah, look, it's been a pleasure today, and I'll let you go back to your day.